Spend enough time with this beautiful medium and you are going to get let down. Your favorite game will get a sequel or a spiritual sequel that doesn't quite manage to capture what it is you liked about the original. And almost always, it's a one-way ratchet. Tank controls aren't coming back to the core Resident Evil experience. Assassin's Creed isn't ever again going to expect its player to plan out their post assassination escape route before unsheathing the hidden blade. Change isn't necessarily bad. Artists would get bored making the same thing over and over, but just as often, the catalyst for change is strictly a business decision. The previous game already scored an existing audience, so now they're eyeing a new one, too. The people who liked, say, the Yakuza games are locked in, say the bean counters. So why not lure in the Persona crowd too by changing their long-running brawler soap opera into a party-based JRPG? If the gamble succeeds, the original fans become revanchists who are just jealous and can't get with the times. If the gamble fails, the series goes on hiatus. For the original fans, it's not actually much of a gamble, they lose either way. Now, the best case scenario is rare, but it does happen. The new model loses steam over time in sales, or in the case of hiatus, in retrospective critical appraisal. And sometimes the IP holder realizes there's still water in that original well. Sega might never restore Yakuza to glory, but they did temporarily hand the keys to Sonic the Hedgehog to Christian Whitehead, who built Sonic Mania, the best received Sonic game since Sega had stopped making hardware, by looking to the lessons of the original Genesis games. Capcom couldn't ignore the DMC complaints and greenlit an actual Devil May Cry 5. Capcom also made Mega Man 9, scraping off not just the rust of 10 years of dormancy, but almost a whole decade of unnecessary sequel-justifying tweaks that had accumulated across the original sequels, like the slide maneuver and the charge shot, to produce perhaps the most well-engineered game in the entire series. And just last year, Koei made Dynasty Warriors Origins, taking advantage of Dynasty Warriors 9's failures to roll back the mistakes of not just 9, but the rest of the post-PS2 misadventures that had gouged out the soul and challenge of the series in favor of fan service and endless content. These rare cases are to be cherished, but their rarity also underlines that sometimes, most of the time, you just gotta move on. I was a fan of the Mario games back in the day when they had some bite, when you didn't have to wait for just one or two post-game stages every 5 to 10 years like Champions Road or Darker Side of the Moon in order to give the mechanics a good workout. And as the challenge level of Mario games was falling off, well, we still had Donkey Kong Country. But the last Donkey Kong Country game was Tropical Freeze, a Wii U game from 12 years ago. And since then, Nintendo, once the undisputed king of platformers, has been serving up 30-hour tutorials with little payoff beyond novelty and kinesthetics. Maybe that sounds harsh, but just speaking from the heart, Donkey Kong Bonanza was my absolute least favorite thing I played in 2025. I'm not trying to tell you it was a bad game. I'm just saying I got nothing out of it. I don't like Nintendo's more playground type games as much as their obstacle course type predecessors, and Bonanza made me realize that to get anything like the joy I got out of 8-bit Super Mario Bros., or really any of the Donkey Kong Country games, I'd have to look elsewhere. This is not my first Wumpa Fruit rodeo. As I mentioned in the Star Fox episode, my family jumped ship from the Super Nintendo to the PlayStation, motivated primarily by Final Fantasy doing the same, but I did end up playing all of the Crash Bandicoot games: Crash 1, Cortex Strikes Back, Crash Warped, and Crash Team Racing, the last of which is fantastic. Probably the best of them, but also it's not a platformer, it is a kart racer, and therefore not particularly relevant to the conversation. And after that, I just kind of stopped thinking about Crash Bandicoot at all for the following 20 years, except in those cases when somebody would mention Mario Kart, and then I would take the opportunity to spread the gospel of Crash Team Racing, which again is fantastic, highly recommended. Go play it. I knew Naughty Dog had stopped making Crash games in favor of Jack games before they stopped making those in favor of Uncharted and beyond. And I don't think I even knew that other developers had gotten involved with Crash after that, or that other Crash games were getting made, but they were. Based on the reviews I surveyed this month, maybe they shouldn't have, but they were. There were about a dozen Crash Bandicoot games following Naughty Dog's exit from the franchise, and then after 2010's Crash Nitro Kart 2, zero new entries for the next 10 years until Crash 4 landed in 2020. Like the game's cheeky subtitle alluded to, it was about time. The Donkey Kong games had kept trucking in the meantime, with 2004's underrated Jungle Beat, 2010's Waggle Saddle Donkey Kong Country Returns, and finally 2014's rock solid Tropical Freeze. I think part of why I didn't notice or care about the decline of Crash Bandicoot is that Donkey Kong was right there. A similar approach to difficulty, momentum, level design, anthropomorphy, and even jungle adjacent theming. Close enough to scratch the itch, at least. But with Donkey Kong forfeiting its claim as a challenging platformer in the Bonanza era, finally my gaze drifts back to Crash Bandicoot. Its Looney Tunes light aesthetic that felt ambitious in 1996 now feels half-assed and soulless, and the few characters that have been added to its roster since 1999's Crash Team Racing, great game by the way, they don't improve the cast at all, but I have never made the mistake of playing Crash Bandicoot for the story. I'm not invested in it, and neither are the game's developers, so why dwell on it? If you're playing a Crash Bandicoot game at all, it's for the trial and error platforming gauntlets and time trials, stringing together seconds or minutes long series of precise inputs to Simon Says your way through increasingly sadistic mazes of death. It's not for everybody, but I love it. These tighter gauntlets tend to be my favorite parts of the saggier platformers like Odyssey's aforementioned Darker Side of the Moon. I think my ideal platformer would be closer to Mario 3, mixing both creativity and challenge at a breakneck pace, but I'm very happy with Crash 4. In many ways, I don't think the subsequent 30 plus years have really managed to improve on Mario 3 and World, but one way in which newer games have managed to one up those golden era classics is in playing with level state, like Mario Galaxy 2's introduction of platforms that appear or disappear every time Mario jumps, or Celeste's hot and cold shifts in the mountain's core, or the entirety of Elekhead. And this is the chief addition that Crash 4 makes to the Crash formula, adding 4 new masks that grant Crash the power to reverse gravity, to make objects tangible and intangible, and so forth. At times it can feel like a simple gimmick, but it allows extra complexity to be layered into the game's spaces. Late in the game, when levels that mix up all 4 masks appear, Crash 4's critical path hits a level of complexity and challenge on par with what Mario and Donkey Kong manage only for their post-game optional challenges, and Crash 4 still has various time trials and other challenges on top of that, making even early and mid-game stages potentially interesting long-term. What this exercise has demonstrated to me is that I do still have a substantial appetite for obstacle course platforming, regardless of which cartoon character serves as its face. At some point, maybe I should give another 3D Playground Collectathon style platformer a shot too. Maybe give Mario 64 another chance. I don't know. I didn't enjoy Bob-omb Battlefield or whatever the area after that was called at all when I played it all those years ago, and I got bored of Banjo-Kazooie too. I want to say tastes can change, but as this video series demonstrates, the toy box style of games has never been and still isn't really my cup of tea, regardless of genre. Is it worth trying to force it, even for a title as venerable and well regarded as Mario 64? A man can be open-minded, open to change, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he can change his nature, does it? Up next, the 1cc craving monster that I awoke while playing Androdunos 2 is back and ready to take a crack at another classic arcade genre, the beat 'em up, 1992's Streets of Rage 2, on whatever difficulty level it turns out I can manage. To this day, my favorite beat 'em ups have been somewhat idiosyncratic, like the side-scrolling Ninja Warriors Again and the curiously D&D-inspired King of Dragons. I've never taken a proper run at the actual urban street violence genre heavyweights, Final Fight 1 and Streets of Rage 2. It's high time.